Okay, so we'll kind of pick up where we left off last time on rate design stuff and thinking about other sort of pricing structures. I talked about demand charges. I talked about critical peak pricing. So this is the one in SMUD. There's actually a different program in PG&E. Yeah, I don't know the sort of dollar amounts here, but this is kind of similar in concept, right? You get sent a notification ahead of time, and then you shift your usage, and then you get rebates basically from PG&E if you reduce your energy use. I don't know how they do the exact calculations, right, for the like counterfactual, right? Because they have to know, oh, this is how much I expected you to have used, and then I see that you used less, and therefore I'm going to give you a rebate. So there is some kind of assumptions and kind of they have some way of essentially modeling or simulating what you would have done in the absence of this kind of notification. Yeah.
It could be similar to how they decide what's it called, the allowance for when you go from tier 1 to tier 2. Like, at least on my bill, it is decided on based on some average usage of similar households on the same plan in my area.
Yep, yep. So I don't know the exact details of what they might do. Might be something like that. But I guess right at the end of the day, the main point is that this is one of the unique things that they've included is a kind of rate design mechanism that gives particular flexibility to address specifically peaking issues. There is, I mean, we're kind of walking through a number of different little oddities of the rate design and like programs that exist in these utilities. And so backing out and not necessarily talking specifically about the details of the program, but one of the things that utilities, particularly in California, think about are considerations for like equity and income, right? So we think about electricity provision as an essential service, and affordability for that essential service is actually considered a core regulatory obligation that utilities have to meet. And so if you think about it, right, someone who's low income, they may actually use less energy, but they have to spend a higher portion of their money on these kind of bills. They often have less control over usage, and could be more disproportionately harmed by certain rate design mechanisms, fixed charges, time of use peaks, rate shocks, right? Their budgets are less flexible to deal with this kind of thing. And so there are actually a number of different rate design mechanisms that are meant to help address some of these. So like there's these care discounts, which provide rate relief for low-income households, baseline allowances. So we think about tiers before, right, in a tiered rate where you have to pay some amount if you use up to some tier, and then your electricity rates go up as you use more. This is kind of similar in concept, but kind of the other way. So you start with a much lower discounted tier up to some baseline. Other ones, so these protections prevent disconnections and compounding debt. And so if someone can't afford it, they have plans to help not just like shut off your electricity, medical baseline, so additional allowance for medical device users. Like if you have like in-home medical equipment, you can actually apply to your utility to get like lower rates, subsidies and rebates and that sort of thing. Fixed charge caps, so limitations on fixed fees for those in the CARE program. So specifically, I think the biggest one is the CARE program, so this income-based rate assistance. So if you're a low-income residential customer, you actually can get reduced electricity and gas rates. The eligibility is based on your household income and size, and then automatically gets applied to your energy bill once enrolled. I actually don't know, like, you guys as students, if you qualify for these, maybe. I don't know if anyone here has tried to use this program.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. What do they say? Do they care that it's like?
It seems like we were accepted into the program when they send me a statement saying, here's how much you saved, it's $0. So I don't really know why that happened.
Yeah. Because I think it's not even like on a baseline thing. I think it just reduces the rate. So you should be, you should check your old bills with your new bills and just literally see if the rates themselves are lower.
Yeah. But like it's just based on household income and like.
Yeah.
We're well. What is it? I'm not sure what the
threshold is. Yeah. Well, there's also this new thing. Well, I'll talk about it in a second. That we can see if you guys qualify. Yeah. So this is the CARE program is for the IOUs, but you could be a CCA in an IOU, and you could qualify for this program as well. So even if you're on like Valley Clean Energy and PG&E, you're still able to get this. Yeah. And the funding for this comes from, right, it's like, it's socialized, right? There's a surcharge on all utility bills. When we looked at the breakdown before, there was a line item called public purpose program charges that helps fund CARE. Yeah, so over 4 million households enrolled statewide. Yeah, provides bill relief, and helps mitigate some of the effects of these of volumetric rates or fixed charges.
Quick update. I apparently failed to complete a post-enrollment verification process.
Oh, okay. Well, until you do that,
So.
Yeah. See if you can do it by the end of the quarter and let everyone know if they're able to be eligible for this, because I think it's actually decent savings. Yeah.
I mean, we don't use much electricity, but
Yeah.
it'll still be good.
They really care about the paperwork.
Yes. Hey man, who knew that this class could save you money? Maybe. Okay. So LIP is low income and energy savings assistance programs in California, and CARE is one of the programs in the sort of broader LIP umbrella. Energy savings assistance program also provides free energy efficiency upgrades based on your CARE enrollment, and so I assume most of you guys are probably renting, so I don't know if you care about getting energy efficiency for your in place for your landlord, but there are some free upgrades that you can get if you're covered by care.
What does LIP stand for?
It's low income assistance programs in California. Yeah.
I'm just happy we've got double pane windows.
Yeah, I mean that does make a difference for sure. Okay, who's heard of AB 205? Oh, wow, nobody. Interesting. Oh, no, did you raise your hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This was passed back in 2022, although there's been like some recent stuff happening with AB 205. This was and is, I think, continues to be a kind of controversial measure that was passed to implement a monthly fixed charge based on household income. So applies to the IOUs, and it basically says every customer just pays a fixed charge, doesn't matter what the usage is, and they are tiered basically just based on income. And so, right, we talk about different ways to do cost recovery, right? Volumetric being the cents per kilowatt hour that we're kind of mostly used to, right? And then we talked about, right, so last class, what are we trying to achieve with rate design? When you have volumetric rates to some degree, right, you're doing a better sort of cost reflectiveness to align prices with the actual system costs, right? Because usually our volumetric rates are somewhat correlated with costs at different times, and also obviously with the amount of electricity that we use. So it does. This shift of cost recovery away from volumetric rates does maybe depart us farther from that particular criteria that I was mentioning.
So,
Yep.
I kind of can't believe that's actually happening.
Yeah. Oh, believe it. It's in place, and it's yeah.
So is that all that we're going to be? Is there also a volumetric charge?
No. You just literally pay a fixed fee.
This is on top of your regular charges, like for energy usage, of course.
No.
But volumetric, what is?
So, usually we pay this, right? Cents per kilowatt hour. This is saying if you are at a certain income range, you don't have to pay based on how much you use, you just pay a fixed monthly charge instead. Yes.
Huh. Why?
Yeah.
How do you incentivize people to use less energy in this case?
I was just gonna say that, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't mind paying $12 instead of $212. So.
Like somebody with a battery, with charging that EV, like they would just be like willy-nilly out there, not really worrying about it.
Yes. So, it is a pretty contentious bill, especially amongst folks in this
Also,
kind
it
of.
seems pretty cheap, like if you're making over $180,000 a year and you're only paying $52,
Yeah, that seems like.
$52 a month, like you have a.
I mean, I'm not.
It's an approximate, yeah. And this doesn't replace everything on your electricity bill. There are like specific pieces of your electricity bill
okay.
yeah.
So
So
like does it just replace the usual fixed charges? That are like.
I don't remember I don't remember the portions of the bill that get carved out that get covered by this. But yeah, so why is this a good thing? There's perpetually push back against the regressivity of high fixed charges. And so they argue that this particular structure of the fixed charges is better because now it's like income tiered, right? And the argument is that low income customers will on net see reductions in their bill. It also means that utilities can recover fixed costs more predictably. Oftentimes utilities prefer these kind of fixed charges because you can kind of count on them it's like if a bunch of people consume less electricity, the utility doesn't start to get in trouble, right? Right. But undermines conservation and efficiency, right? So that price signal for lowering usage is lost in this type of rate design. If you are a small household or renter, and you don't use that much electricity, but you have a high income, right? This can actually cause your bills to go up. And then there's this is a perpetual problem with like low income assistance programs for verification. Yeah, and they didn't like the appearance of basically this idea that we're kind of like bailing out utilities by locking in the way that cost recovery happens with these flat charges. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that last point? I'm not sure I understand how fixed charges help them.
So there's a little bit of uncertainty when you have volumetric charges in terms of like how much money the utility is going to make, right? Especially in a world where we're starting to have more energy efficiency measures, right, which are driving down the revenue that utilities see. And so utilities have kind of historically pushed for rates that are not volumetric based, that are like flat or fixed in some way, so that they can guarantee that revenue is coming in, even if someone's implementing like energy efficiency measures. Yeah.
So how are the fixed charges under flat systems regressive?
Because some of the fixed costs, the fixed costs in the old system are not tiered by income in any way, right? And so.
What do you mean by flat system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so remember that parts of your bill have fixed charges and parts of your bill are volumetric. And so some of the fixed stuff, right, that faces all the customers in utility territory, you kind of have to pay no matter what. And because they're not tiered by income, by nature are going to be regressive. Yeah.
Will this encourage them to attempt to increase the capital value less because they have a more predictable way of recovering cost?
I don't know how much that ties into that part of the decision making. Yeah, I guess in theory it might create more of an incentive to do so, but remember that all of this stuff has to go through the approval process in the general rate case through PUC, right? And so ideally, you would kind of keep that separate. You would be doing the build out based off of what was the term, used and useful, right? As opposed to seeing this as an opportunity to try and build more. But that's in an ideal world. I don't know what those executives at PG&E are thinking. Okay, so related to this idea are sort of different customer classes. So, I think what we were mainly talking, what we were just talking about is kind of differentiation based on end use, and I was sort of positing that, whether good or bad, right? That we differentiate on income. I mean, I generally think that that's a good thing, but actually, there's a sort of different type of differentiation that I think is important to think about as well, right? That the end users can actually be a lot more different. We're mainly focusing on the residential piece, but actually consider, right, that residential usage of electricity compared to commercial or industrial can actually be quite different, right? And so this plot here kind of shows a breakdown of, right, so our total demand may look like this, but actually, a commercial demand might look more like this, where you have a lot more load and activity kind of during the day. Residential, the peak might be a little bit later, right? And so this is people going to work, going to school, and then coming home, and then using electricity, and then going to sleep, right? Versus maybe an industrial load in magnitude is lower, but look at the shape, it's very flat compared to our other ones. So things are peaking at different times, things are happening in different sort of magnitudes. Right, so industrial is high usage, but often stable and predictable. Commercials tends to have higher total usage, flatter shape, and at a different peaking during the day. Yes.
So by limited peak diversity, does that just mean that like the time and magnitude of peak usage is like very similar across residential customers?
Yep, exactly. So for commercial, the peak diversity may actually be quite a bit different if you're like zooming into a particular like customer, for example. Whereas residential, that shape tends to be fairly robust. Yeah, and so for commercial, you might think like the peak for a grocery store and the load shape for a grocery store might look really different than the load shape of a breakfast diner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah.
And I've got a question that might be silly. Explain again, what's the difference between load and demand? Kind of seems like we're using them
Yeah, we
interchangeably,
are.
but-
I'm using them interchangeably.
Okay.
They're basically the same. Well,
I understand
demand is
that
what you're.
describing the same thing from different perspectives.
Yeah, well, so demand, I guess technically would be what a customer would be asking from the grid, and then the load is what they're actually receiving, and they generally are going to be the same. The only instance where that's going to differ is like if you have an
Data
out.
center or something.
Right.
No, if you have an outage, right? Like, I still have demand, but I have no load. I
So
guess.
It makes sense to have a distinction between the two terms so that you can clarify the goal of having them match.
Yeah, although
Or-
anytime we're not talking about like outage situations,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna use them interchangeably. Yeah.
I was thinking like a data center would have a huge demand. But
Uh-huh.
couldn't be served out at all times, or like, let's.
What do you mean? Like,
Well, like if they had somebody wants to build a huge data center. They
Yeah.
go to PG&E, they're like, hey, this is our demand. And then.
Oh, well,
PG&E goes, no, we can't serve.
oh, okay. Maybe that's a little different. So when we're talking about I mean, that's like a generic type of like demand for a particular good or service. When I'm talking about like electricity usage, when I say demand, that's referring specifically to the demand for electricity at a given time. Yeah. Okay. So an industrial customer and a commercial customer and a residential customer do not see the same rates from a utility. And there are some good reasons why we would want that to be different, right? So load variability, when the peak's happening, the complexity of the bills, how an end use customer is impacting our system costs, and then how the measurement happens are all pretty different amongst our different customer classes, right? And so this is a little table that helps break that down. The variability of load is, okay, maybe this is like contrary to what I was just saying, on a sort of daily time scale and variability across that customer class, it's actually very similar, but across time can look pretty different. So seasonality is a big driver of variability in homes, whereas you know, like a Target, for example, is basically always going to have their AC on, right? But yeah, the load variability, high, moderate, low, peak coincidence, high. We have daytime peaks in commercial. And then lower system coincidence. So what I was referring to before in terms of low variability is that typically the peak is always going to happen in the evening. Billing complexity, usually we're doing simple volumetric time of use charges on residential. For commercial, this is going to be time of use and demand charges that we mentioned before, and then industrial can get even more complex. Yeah, okay, and so I'll kind of let you guys digest this on your own as a reference. So, okay, how do we know what any particular class of customer should pay? So one of the things that utility can do is known as a cost of service study. And this is a method that they use to determine how much it costs that utility to serve a particular customer class. And actually that cost of service study, right, is part of the general rate case. They have to submit this cost of service study to the PUC to get evaluated to make sure that they are actually charging different customers fairly. So remember our equation for revenue requirement, right? That's based off of the rate base plus their return plus all of those other terms, right? That is then allocated across different customer classes based on how much energy usage is happening in a class, the peak demand for that class, and then the number of customers. And that's going to reflect basically the differences in the cost to serve those customers. Okay. The cost allocations can be pretty uneven, right? So this is a hypothetical output that I kind of just made up. So here, maybe a residential customer uses 40% of the energy use, small commercial 25%, large industrial 35%. They can make their revenue requirement kind of correlated to that energy usage, right? And then decide to charge based on that. Not like the costs don't have to reflect necessarily the same the same like ratio of usage, right? Because it's not just about the total energy use. It can also be having to do with, you know, stability of the load, having to deal with peaks. And so oftentimes you may actually have, you know, lower cost per kilowatt hour for, an industrial customer which has a much flatter load shape, for example. Yeah, and so there is this kind of fundamental question of whether or not it makes sense to just base this on cost of service. When we look at rate structures by different classes, this might be kind of a typical type of thing that you see, right? So fixed monthly charge, $10 for PG&E, and then your energy charge could vary anywhere between 18 cents to 50 cents, depending on what you qualify for as a residential customer in PG&E. They wouldn't have any demand charges, and then very rare to have real-time pricing. Whereas small commercial customers, so this is the A1 plan in PG&E, they'll have higher monthly charges, lower volumetric charges, but then they might be assessed a demand charge. And then large industrial customers have very high fixed monthly charges, lower volumetric charges, but then they can have decently large demand charges to kind of balance out what they're costing to the grid. Okay, any questions about that?
Can you remind me what CPP stands
CPP, I don't remember that acronym, but it is basically a variation of real-time pricing.
for? Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't it critical peak pricing?
CPP, this one. Yes, you're right. This is in addition to real-time pricing. Yes, you have critical peak pricing. That was the program we were mentioning that you can opt into for a service to get lower baseline rates, but then very high critical peak pricing rates on certain days of the year. Okay. And then the last thing in the rates, actually let's press on for a second and then we'll take a break after net energy metering. So the last kind of larger segment for rate design I'll talk about, so net energy metering, we were just talking about this at the beginning of class, right? So this is the idea that allows customers that have on-site generation of some kind, right? And so that really comes into play with solar on your rooftops to export excess electricity to the grid and receive credit. So here historically at the full retail rates, that's kind of like the earliest instantiations of NEM. But as we saw from Jason's bill, we've kind of departed from that. The basic concept here is that you have a bidirectional meter, and so if you generate power and anything you don't use up at home will actually go through your meter, and it will essentially spin the other way, and then send electricity back into the grid. Yeah, so your meter spins back. It doesn't literally spin anymore. That used to be the way meters worked, but essentially will count what's getting exported And then,
I wish to explain that.
yeah, the credits will offset consumption, right? And then either on a monthly true up if you're in NEM 3.0 or on like an annual true up, you know, if you're on NEM 1 or 2. And this was originally a design to promote the adoption of behind the meter renewables. I think that's kind of reflected in the way that NEM was originally designed, but with NEM 3.0, for example, is more designed to try and maybe fix some of the issues that were brought about with the earlier generations of net energy metering.
Yeah, I've heard it, they said like, basically with NEM1, you were using the grid as your battery. It's like how people phrase it.
Yeah. So let's talk about what NEM did. So started in 2000, all the way through 2016. You get full retail credit for exported energy at the same as your consumption rate. So there are no fixed charges that you have to deal with, no grid access fees, no time differentiation. And there's a cap for NEM 1.0 at 5% of the peak load from the utility. So this was a great benefit, right? You could build a solar panel on your house, and then whatever you're making will directly offset what you use. But not only that, if you overproduce, you actually will make a lot of money as well. Yeah.
How do people stay on these legacy systems?
You don't get to, well,
Or does this change?
yeah. If you are on the legacy program, you just get grandfathered in as the new ones come out.
Assuming you never move or a new customer never replaces you.
No, even if a customer comes in, wait, is that true? I
Yeah,
can't,
I've heard you've been able to take it over.
yeah, I think you still inherit,
I've heard that.
yeah.
But the thing is, you can't make any upgrades.
Yes. If you trigger an interconnection request from the utility, they'll kick you off the plan and put you onto the new one. Which means whatever you got, that's what you got, unless you want to go onto the new plan.
Damn.
What
You
if,
can't upgrade your panels?
I would think O&M should be exempt from that. Like, what if you're replacing at the same size of system?
Then I don't think you need a,
The panel isn't changing.
yeah, I don't think you need to make an interconnection request if it's the same, if it's just like maintenance, yeah.
Still replace all of them at once, and what's with, whoa, how are you generating so much all of this?
Okay. So here's the thing about NEM that people didn't realize. Non-solar customers still pay for the grid, right? So we have this revenue requirement. Everyone pays into that, right? That the utilities kind of farm out to all the customers. If you're a rooftop solar customer, you could just zero out your bills, right? Like I could be, I hate to use myself as an example, but I am like obviously in a legacy plan. If I didn't have solar, it actually close it. Let's see here. Okay. Is there some way for me to actually look at?
Well, was differentiated?
No, I mean, because this is all net. I wonder if there's anything on here that tells me about the actual generation? Probably not, because they don't measure that separately on the meter anyways.
So what, you moved into yours? 'Cause you haven't been here that long, have you?
Yeah, we got our house in 2020. Yeah.
So, oh, okay, so, I was thinking of like legacy, like, when you say legacy,
This is like, I mean, this is a, I believe this is a NEM 2.0.
oh, okay.
Yeah, not 3.0. Anyways, so let's just hypothetically imagine that I produce enough solar to discount maybe like 80% of my bill. So I now pay $1,000 a year, but I should be paying $5,000 a year, right? Okay. Well, so remember, what does the bill pay for? It doesn't just pay for the generation of electricity. It also pays for distribution, transmission, and so on, right? So I now no longer pay, 80% of the cost that I should be paying for distribution and transmission, but someone has to pay that, right? So what does the utility do?
Raise rates
They,
for
they have the revenue requirements that they're allowed to recover, so they raise rates for everyone else. So technically, all you guys are paying for what I should be paying and what all these other solar customers should be paying for transmission and distribution and all these other fixed charges, right? And
You're talking about when you send it back to the grid? Or-
no.
Even when he just like draws.
Even if I replace the electricity that I'm using, right? But like, think of it conceptually. My house is connected to all this transmission and distribution,
Yeah.
and if I just use what I produce, then I'm not using that distribution and transmission. And so if we could, in a perfect world, decide to size that transmission and distribution, maybe it'd be a lot smaller to my neighborhood, or maybe it wouldn't even be there, right? But guess what? It's already built. It's there. People have to pay for it. So
I see what you're saying.
this is the crux of the like NEM debate, which is you'll hear kind of two sides to this, but the idea, right, is that some people really dislike NEM 3.0 because it tries to fix some of these issues. Some people like NEM 3.0 because it tries to fix some of these issues, but there is also a group of people who really dislike NEM 3.0 because,
Ultimately means your bills are higher.
well, no, it's the other way. They're saying, yeah, you've been making us pay for, there's this, solar is getting cheaper and cheaper, more and more people are able to afford it and adopt it, and NEM 3.0 makes the benefits of having solar a lot less for all of these people. And kind of rightly so, they're saying, look, you've been making us pay for you for 20 years, right, for 2 decades, and now when I can finally take advantage of it, you like pull the rug out from us and we don't get the benefits, right? Is that how you feel, Jason?
I mean, I get it that like NEM 1 and 2, like especially NEM 1, it was like creating more or less like free riders.
Yes.
Like the grid, and so that can't remain in effect because otherwise you're penalizing all the other customers.
Yeah.
If there was a fixed rate charge on NEM 1 people that they still had to pay for some infrastructure,
Yeah.
it would be fair across the board. It'd be great. But I mean,
It's tough. It's tough, right? It's not an easy thing to deal with. We talk about rates going up a lot in the last couple of years, right? So part of that is the wildfire undergrounding stuff. Probably the other biggest thing that's like why your rates are going up is is NEM.
And
Yeah.
I'll say the other thing that may sting to people who are like more EJ motivated is early adopters of solar are the people who had money to buy
Yeah,
solar.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
these are people who actually
didn't need
could
those benefits.
pay their bills with no problems, and then now it's just placing those costs on the people who couldn't afford that, who
Yeah.
could really use the money.
So we think about NEM as this incentive to get people onto solar, but so many people are doing it. Remember that you guys pay for all of those people, right? And so the more and more and more and more people, like there's a higher proportion of people taking advantage of it, which also means that there's a smaller proportion of people, right, who are paying for that larger proportions that's offset, right? So, you know, at some point, you know, if it's at 10%, then you have 9 people recovering for that one person. If it's at 25%, now you have 3 people covering for that one person. And if you're at 50%, now you have 1 person covering for 1 person, right? So as the adoption goes up, you're like, the effect on the rates is gonna like compound and feel even worse.
And see what it's effectively done is you have to install batteries now. If you're on NEM3, you pretty much have to have batteries to make it.
Yeah, so on an individual basis, right? And we saw that on your bill. Basically, you want to make sure you are not like export. I mean, that's how you play the game, but in general, it's still not great. So NEM 2.0 tried to add this interconnection fee and then non-bypassable charges on each kilowatt hour that's consumed from the grid, and so it gets around some of this because you still have to pay for some portion of your bill that's not that doesn't get what was the word, cut out right by the solar exports.
So the non-bypassable charges, does that mean that if you are producing enough solar power to power your house, even if you use that power, you're being charged for it?
No, so the non-bypassable charge might be something like in NEM 1.0, as I use more, my bill goes down, I get to not pay for any volumetric charge, which might include something like transmission and distribution. Whereas here, yes, you're still getting refunded on the volumetric, but parts of your volumetric bill they will sort of bypass that. So it's almost like it almost acts like a fixed charge essentially. So you would still be paying for like transmission distribution, for example.
If you ever happen to use electricity outside of the times when the solar is producing, right?
Wait, say that again. If you are using,
If you're using.
if you're consuming grid electricity, that's right. Yeah.
Versus getting full credit sort of stashed.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Were there a lot of people on NEM2 that also installed batteries, you think?
I don't think that was as big of a deal as in NEM 3.0. Yeah, so no more retail rate credit for exports, right? You only get 5 cents on off-peak times, or right, whatever that was. Export compensation is based on some avoided cost calculator. Your time of use energy use is still priced normally, so you still have the ability to get bill reductions. But the payback period actually increases quite a bit if you look at the math for buying like a solar panel and then trying to make your money back. And then encourages pairing solar with storage to time your exports or to increase your self-consumption. Right.
There's an ECI mode for Enphase that basically your batteries will carry you through peak hours.
Right.
So then you're still on the grid at night, but at least your batteries get you through that.
Yeah. Although it looked like on your bill, the peak was didn't really make that big of a difference. Yeah, I'd be interested. Maybe let us know in the summer months how different that is. Because I think that the difference between off-peak on-peak does get a little bit bigger in the summer months. Yeah, so yeah, this is a very very controversial thing, right? And so there are pros and cons, obviously, to this. Undercuts decarbonization goals. Consumer advocate groups really, some consumer advocate groups, I should say, depending on what you're advocating for, because actually there are consumer advocate groups who are heavily against them. I mean, they support it to reduce cost shifting. On the other hand, right, this is like, yeah, there's advocacy against 3.0 because, yeah, you're taking away this like bigger incentive that should have been in place for all these people who've been paying into the system to essentially support, you know, NEM 1 and 2 customers.
It's almost like encourages, you can't do this, there's anti-islanding things, but it encourages like, things like islanding.
Is that really a
Like, I feel
common
like if
thing?
people could, they would.
Yeah, I think people just hate utilities in general, so there's also stick it to your utility, yeah.
What do you mean by long-term benefits?
By,
In the graphic,
oh,
top line.
locked in benefits. What are locked in benefits? 20 years to 9 years.
Is this like the time for the NEM contract?
I thought it was in perpetuity, but maybe not.
I'll look at my contract and see if it's, I didn't notice if there's an expiration date.
It may, I think maybe, yeah, it locks you into the NEM plan for some amount of time, which is what lets you get like grandfathered into the old ones. Yeah.
So like if you're within that lock-in period, you're still grandfathered in?
Yeah, yeah, and in fact, prior to April 13th, there's if you look at the data on solar installs, it's crazy. It goes, and then after April 13th, it like drops off a cliff. Yeah, it's picking up a little bit again, but at a lower rate than kind of the baseline rate. There was I was at a conference recently where people were showing some data about this. It's pretty interesting.
Is that because on April 13th they killed the tax incentive?
Well, it kills the NEM incentive. Yeah, you switch from NEM 2 to 3. So if you put in your solar panel before April 13th of what did I say? 2022, 2023, 2023. Before 2023, April 13th, you're on NEM 2.0. After, you're on NEM 3.0. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of a window into the electricity system from the customer side, right? It's not just like prices that we see, right? This is a thing that helps to allocate costs, shape behavior, and also express policy priorities. And we have complex rate design because there's all these decisions being made as kind of trade-offs, thinking about like efficiency versus equity, simplicity versus cost reflectiveness, stability versus flexibility. And a lot of these programs are kind of these one-off things with specific goals and objectives in mind, and you can really see from the way that the rate design happens as it pertains to any one particular program, as for better or worse, as reflecting a set of specific goals. And in the aggregate, these things get mushed into these single big bills, which does make the simplicity part of the bill and the transparency of bills get really muddled. yeah. So how we structure rates is going to determine who pays one, how much, whether new technologies are adopted equitably, and how utilities are awarded for investment in performance. Okay. Last thing for this. Rates in the 21st century. Yeah, there are all these things that are happening that are putting pressure on rates in certain directions. This is like a small snapshot of things we need to think about and deal with in the future, right? So electrification, rising fixed costs, distributed energy resources, how we're dealing with extreme weather events and resilience in general, and then this idea of affordability, which is these days really on the forefront of both the utilities mind, but also like, I'm thinking mainly in the California context, but sort of generally, right, electricity rates have been going up a lot. So this is a bigger deal these days. Okay, let's take a quick break. Let's do 4 minutes, and then we'll continue on with the next lecture.
4-minute breaks got me feeling like NEM 3.
Do you foresee like a future where they release another NEM proposed like the next decade? Either reverse or
I don't think they'll ever go back to the way that they were. I think that would just create more problems. But I think that they'll probably have something within the next decade.
what do you think that like?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it that much.
So what does your old friend from college, from your PhD do at your guys'
Let me see. So I think he does a lot of of their transmission planning operations. Although maybe that's his older role, because I know that he's moved up a lot. Let me take a look. What is his current title? On the cutting edge of electricity markets and grid design. Okay, so he used to be in resource adequacy, and he's now
That's what they want to interview. Resource adequacy analyst.
he resource adequacy and ICAP specialist. Apparently now he's like the head manager of energy market design.
Wait, what's his name? I thought he talked to him.
Nate? Nate Gilbreth.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know him?
Well, so so one of the projects they had me do last summer was like email. So the director of market policy development at ISO is part of like the IRC,
Okay.
which is like a group of like market design directors of like different ISOs. So they had me like, I don't know him, but they had me email like, I'm pretty sure I emailed him. To find out about what demand response products different ISOs are using.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I like put together a survey. I think I.
Did NISO fill it out?
So yeah, so they have like the most complicated.
I'm not surprised.
Demand response programs.
Yeah.
So.
How so?
Uh,
I mean, that's fair, that's fair.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like a
Cool.
different- They have like a different system, okay, so.
Yeah, I mean, if you are, well, let's talk after
Yeah.
class. Okay, anyways, moving on. So, next topic we'll be talking about is procurement. And we've kind of danced around this a little bit throughout the class. So what is procurement? So this is how a load-serving entity assembles a portfolio of resources to supply or to serve demand, okay? And so load-serving entity, right, as a reminder, that is any entity that is like customer-facing, right? And so for us in California, right here, that would be PG&E. They are the sort of last end of the electricity system that faces the customer. And they are the ones who are responsible for acquiring resources to provide us electricity. So they have to procure electricity, energy, forward into the future, and that can happen on many different time scales, from years to decades, all the way down to, at the sort of real-time market timing. They will procure energy on the basis of like portfolios as opposed to like the unit by unit dispatch, which we are thinking of more kind of on the market side. And so, yeah, so so they're risk oriented as well. So they're thinking about ways that they can increase reliability and decrease risks. And they're going to be regulated in most jurisdictions. The procurement itself is going to be regulated. So importantly, procurement is not like a real-time dispatch. It's not market clearing. It's not based on these like short-term optimizations, right? So we discussed before kind of how the markets work in order to provide power in a certain way. Procurement exists in parallel to the markets.
So it has nothing to do with scheduling. Let's say less to do with scheduling.
Yeah, well, I'll have a little walkthrough of this so that we can kind of understand how it exists parallel to the way power is scheduled, right? So if the spot markets, right, that we were talking before about were kind of sufficient by themselves, that means then we wouldn't need any like long-term contracts, right? It also means that you would have to tolerate price volatility, right? Because you think about wholesale markets, the rates will kind of move up and down at different times. And reliability would be an emergent property. That is to say, reliability is a product of like market outcomes, and you would have to shape the market in ways to guarantee that reliability. But in reality, right, demand is inelastic, and as such, we consider reliability issues to be essentially unacceptable. And then also in reality, you need capital investment, right? You need revenue certainty. And so if you are only operating on the spot market and you're like, oh, I want to build this power plant, and you go to a bank and you say, let me borrow some money, they can be like, well, okay, how can you guarantee that you're going to get turned on, right? There's this uncertainty related to that capital investment. And also we might have policy goals that just don't really interact cleanly in the markets, right? And so let's say I want clean power, but then solar and wind is like more expensive than, you know, natural gas plants, for example. Then you may have difficulty achieving those kind of policy outcomes with just these markets. Yeah.
Is there another term for spot market you've used
So all of the stuff that we were talking about with like real-time markets, day-ahead markets,
Yeah.
that's considered the spot market.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Say you're a huge solar farm, you have a PPA sign.
We're going to talk about PPAs. Yeah, because I think not everyone in this class is like going to be totally familiar with that. Yeah. Yes.
What about like capacity markets?
Yeah, so capacity markets will help in some regard with some of this stuff. And procurement can and does touch into capacity. So we'll see that. Yeah, I feel like I'm saying it in a way that's like that capacity does show up in procurement. I should be more clear. It's very common for capacity to be an element of procurement. Yeah. And so procurement helps to fill gaps that the market doesn't. Okay, and so who are the entities that are procuring power? So, right, the load serving entities, right? So I mentioned the investor-owned utilities, also CCAs, municipal utilities, electric co-ops, competitive retail suppliers. So these are generally the list of entities that are kind of customer facing, right? Yeah, and so the obligation of a load serving entity, meet load, actually, based on the discussion earlier, I should say meet demand and provide the load, meet resource adequacy requirements, meet policy mandates, and then do so at reasonable costs. I feel like a lot of this language is maybe centered in kind of the California lingo. You know, it could be meet other general sort of like capacity requirements. And there's other stakeholders. We've talked about these, so I'm not going to get into them, and we'll see how they play roles a little bit later. But these guys are the entities that, you know, will help shape the way that procurement happens. Okay, so what is the procurement? What is the thing that's actually being procured, right? We were mentioning energy and capacity, but it's not just that. Flexibility, reliability services, and then other sort of policy goals. So multiple distinct products, and procurement can be trying to get at like multiple or all of these things kind of simultaneously. So energy is, I think, the big one, obvious one that most people think of. Well, energy and capacity, I should say. So this is the actual electricity that gets delivered over time. This is going to be procured through long-term power purchase agreements, which we'll talk about. It can also be through utility-owned generation, and then through like short-term market purchases on the spot market. And this helps to manage the price volatility. And we're going to see how that works very explicitly in a second. Capacity, this is the ability to deliver power when needed, right? And so we've talked about this concept of resource adequacy in the past. Peak demand is this rare thing that happens. And markets by themselves may not necessarily always support investment into the capital to have these resources available. You've got flexibility. So this might be, right, the availability of like ramping, for example. And this matters in order to deal with ramping constraints, with things like renewable forecast errors and like these larger like evening transitions like the duck curve that we've talked so much about. And the procurement for this might be through things like storage contracts, flexible gas contracts, and other energy products.
Batteries.
Yep, storage contracts. Yep.
So, why do you specify net load?
Net load is
After renewables?
yes.
Okay.
Reliability services. So we've talked about the like ancillary services that provide these, and this is just to say that those services aren't just provided and accounted for on the markets that we talked about before, but they can also be explicitly procured by the LSEs. And then lastly, broader policy attributes, right? And so if we wanted like renewables, other clean energy attributes, emissions compliance, oftentimes these are going to be required by law, but they might not align with like reliability needs or other needs of the grid. Procurement is a way that you can help to meet some of the requirements outside of the market. I'm gonna rearrange these slides a little bit. I'm gonna skip, we'll come back to, so I have an example of like sort of broader procurement strategy that happened in California, but let's actually skip forward first and talk about the procurement instruments themselves, and then we can go back to that. Okay, the big one. We've heard people talking about this in this class. I may have mentioned this a few times in this class. Power purchase agreement, a PPA. Okay, a PPA is a long-term contract between a load-serving entity and a generator. Well, I'm gonna say we're using the first example of load-serving entity first to talk about PPAs. There are other types of PPAs between generators and other entities, which we'll get to. These are long-term contracts, like 10 to 25 years, typically, and it can bundle different types of different things, right? And so we talked about those 5 attributes in the previous slides, right? But so energy, capacity, and resource adequacy, other environmental attributes. These are very common things that we would see bundled in. And just to be kind of clear on nomenclature, the PPA by default is really in reference to the energy portion. And then there are other things that might be bundled into these contracts, like the resource adequacy. and we just call it just like this big bundled PPA. There are like resource adequacy contracts as standalones that we, I guess, technically don't call a PPA, and we'll talk about that as like a separate thing. But so mainly the focus right now is going to be on the energy piece. Okay, so, I think I forgot to grab an arrow in my animation. Okay, don't disregard this arrow for a second. Okay, so we have a purchase power agreement. There's a settlement between our load serving entity, the utility, and our generator. Okay. And they're gonna have a contract price of $50. So, okay. So how does this work? Okay. So physically speaking, right, generator is gonna produce electricity. Let's say there's 1 megawatt hour demanded by our end customer. And the LMP, so the price to deliver that energy, taking into account the cost of producing it, taking into account, well, what else is in the LMP? Quick reminder.
Congestion and losses.
Yep, congestion and losses. So we've gotten those 3 portions of the costs into this LMP, so $50. Great. So how does this work out in the market? So this tier here in green is going to be our market. Okay, so generator produces that. The system operator will then pay the generator that $50 for the electricity that they've produced. Okay, and then the ISO will recover that $50 from the utility. Okay, and then the utility, how does the utility recover the money? Right, they get that from the customer. So when the market and the contract price are the same, you don't have to worry about anything. No PPA payment required. So ultimately, customer pays the utility $50, and we're good. Okay, everyone follow along so far? This is kind of the schema that hopefully we're kind of familiar with at this point, and this is generally how the market will play out in terms of the transfers of money. So when the expectations are right, the PPA is invisible. Okay, what happens if the fuel prices are higher than expected? So let's say we still set at our contract price of $50, but our market price is $80. So generator produces that 1 megawatt hour that's requested with an LMP of $80 instead of $50. Okay, so the ISO now has to pay the generator $80 for the cost of the services that they provided. The utility must reimburse the ISO the $80 that they paid to the generator. All right, and here is where the PPA kicks in. So that load serving entity, right, the utility has this agreement with the generator. I'm gonna buy power from you for $50. But in this case, the market price was higher. So generator, you received $80. Now you have to pay me $30, right?
Still works out.
And the customer now pays $50. So what happened here? So importantly, the customer is insulated from the volatility of the market, right? We can see that happening. And so, yeah, they're shielded from the price spike.
So
The-
does the generator like lose money in this case because they're paying $30?
Yeah, so the PPA converts the volatile market prices into stable prices for the utility, and in this case, the generator loses out.
So the generator doesn't take advantage of like the high fuel price, they just get whatever the PPA says they will.
Yeah, and in fact, maybe they lose money in some cases, right? Maybe, yeah, it could be the case that, right, so the risk has now shifted from the customer to the generator. Why would a generator want to do this? So what if fuel prices are lower than expected? So let's walk through the same example, right? So contract price, $50 with a market price of $30. So now we got our same thing, 1 megawatt hour requested. So in this case, the physical part of it doesn't change at all. And our kind of market payments don't change. I mean, the amounts change, but right, this whole mechanism is the same. ISO pays the generator $30, utility pays ISO $30, and now what happens? Which means
$20 something.
utility, remember, they had a handshake agreement that I would buy electricity from you for $50. So it only cost me $30. So too bad, you still got to pay. So utility pays $20. Customer pays same, right? So they get the benefits of getting shielded from price spikes, but they lose out on potential sort of discounts if the market prices are lower than the contract prices. Yeah.
Are PPAs how congestion is sort of settled?
Are PPAs how congestion is settled?
Like if a customer needs, I don't know, 100 megawatts in a given hour, there's a transmission constraint somewhere for like the lowest price generator that says you can only transmit 50 megawatts over that. So you have, I don't know, low price generator A, but you still need to get 50 megawatts left over from generator B, which has a higher price.
Yeah.
If I understand how the market clears, the scheduling coordinator would still pay the highest LMP, but pay that towards both generator A and generator
Yep.
B.
The clearing price. Yeah.
Yeah, but like it gets a little muddy at that point. At least when I was going to the KAISO trainings, it seems that like the cheaper generator doesn't actually see the benefit of the higher LMP. Like that sort of the difference between what generator A and generator B is charging is still paid by the scheduling coordinator, but it just doesn't, it somehow disappears.
Well, okay. So just to be clear, when you have a market clearing price, that gets paid out to all of the generators
Yeah.
on this like volumetric basis, kind of no matter what. And so for a low cost generator, they would see a benefit of a high clearing price when they're bidding low into the market. The congestion piece of it is included in the LMP, and so when they get reimbursed from KAISO, they will we'll actually talk about some of this complexity about how the transmission payouts work, but that congestion piece will Okay, I want to make
I
sure.
think I'll try and bring this to you in office hours.
Yeah.
I want to show you specifically the specific graphic that baffles me.
Okay, so we're gonna walk through this particular example when I talk about transmission owners and operators and how they will recover money from the like LMP settlements, which I think is what you're talking about. To clarify, the PPAs don't really interact with the way that the market is handled.
Okay.
You can think of it as like a layer on top of the market. And so like the PPAs add all this stuff into the
Make sure
way.
there's a generator available in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so the PPAs, like, yes, that's one thing, like with the resource adequacy piece, but the PPAs really are a mechanism to shift risk, right? So in the way that a market is set up, there are certain risks with how exposed a load serving entity or a customer might be to like price shifts. But the PPA works to shift the entities who are exposed to risk in different ways. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I'm just thinking like, what's the scenario where a generator isn't competitive enough that they get selected for, say, the day ahead market?
Yeah.
They still have to pay via the PPA agreement, right?
Yes. Well,
Like,
usually.
The price is too high and it's not clear.
Right, like if
Yeah.
they aren't getting a payment from ISO because they weren't selected.
I'll think of that like from Goodfellas. You know, they're like, you didn't produce energy, F you, pay me. Like they just, sorry, you just gotta, right? This is like this contract is a guarantee, right? And removing that risk does shift risk in certain ways to the generator, but we'll see actually it also provides certain guarantees which are really important for development of new resources actually.
One other quick question.
Yep.
Say you're a big solar farm and you have excess energy being produced more so than what you've already committed in a PPA.
Yeah.
Um,
That's yours. You can do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. Okay, I take it back.
I could sell that extra energy to the grid, isn't it?
Yep. Yep. On the spot market. Yeah. Yeah. So here, the customers no longer see the benefit of our price drops. So the utility is trading, right? They're essentially hedging, right? They are trading an upside of the lower prices for stable prices, right? So you are saying, I might have some downside, I might have some upside. Let me offset all of those trade-offs just for stability.
Seems really great for utilities since they're so highly regulated generally.
Well, also like generators can get like more favorable loans to have.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about exactly that.
You guys may have like a guaranteed income.
Yep. So utility hedges fuel and price volatility, stabilizes rates, reduces exposure to scarcity pricing. The generator guarantees revenue certainty, which supports financing and reduces market risk. And the system itself, the dispatch, still follows our normal market system, following marginal cost, and then reliability and efficiency is preserved. So as I was mentioning, utilities are not the only entities who make these contracts. So we can also think of the customers as entities who are taking or making making contracts with generators. So large industrial customers, data centers, firms with clean energy commitments, universities. Davis, if you don't recognize. We've made sort of large PPAs in the past.
There's no buildings that tall, so I just don't get to see that view.
Yes, right. This is probably a drone shot of some kind. Yeah, there's RMI. Okay, some differences with utility PPAs. I mentioned, right, that a lot of these PPAs bundle other things within them. So energy, resource adequacy, other attributes, and oftentimes are used to help meet regulatory obligations. And ultimately, there's this like guarantee that it's backed by ratepayers, right? Whereas corporate PPAs usually are just energy and attributes. They don't typically do capacity because they don't have to meet regulatory obligations for resource adequacy. Buyer doesn't control dispatch. And then the risk is borne directly by the corporate buyer, as opposed to utilities who can count on their customers to essentially provide the revenue. Okay, we're gonna have just a couple minutes left, so I'm gonna skip this, and we're gonna talk about physical versus financial PPAs at the start of next class. But I thought it would be useful to look at this sort of example, to close out. So Main Street Power PPA. So this is a power purchase agreement that UC Davis made, a 20-year contract that started in January of 2012. This was for 756 kilowatt of production capacity from a solar solar farm. Right, and so let's think about why Davis might make this kind of power purchase agreement. And hopefully this will kind of hit home this idea here. Okay, so let's say Main Street Power, they're like, oh, I'm interested in building out a solar farm. And so they go to a bank and they say, oh, please loan me some money to build out this solar farm. And the bank will say, okay, you want to build this. Well, who is buying the power and at what price are they going to be purchasing this power, and for how long is this going to be happening, right? And so these are details that you probably want to know as like a banker making an investment decision, right? And how could Main Street Power be able to forecast like what energy prices are going to look like 20 years in the future? Who knows, right? And so in steps Davis, and they say, okay, I will buy your electricity. And so they make this handshake agreement to purchase they make this purchase power agreements. Okay, and so what does Main Street Power get out of it? Predictable revenue stream, and now they have a bankable contract. Now they can answer all of these questions, right? And the bank will say, okay, great. I can see that based off of this contract, you're gonna be making this money, and so I will be able to, provide the investment funds for this. And what does UC Davis get out of this? Long-term price stability. Who knows what the market's gonna be doing over the next 20 years? They get to show progress towards sustainability goals. We get to say, we have all this green electricity that's coming into this, powering our campus, right? Visibility, reputational value, and then support for like local energy development. Because Main Street Power is like a local energy developer. And so PPAs are not just these financial hedges, they're very powerful investment signals and can translate demand for clean energy into physical infrastructure, right? So imagine in this case that there was no PPA, right? We talk about this additionality thing that I was mentioning earlier. about attributing a particular decision to increasing the amount of renewable energy. Without this PPA, the solar plant would not have been built. But with it, we can say, actually, it is the PPA that is directly attributable to producing renewable energy.
And,
Yeah.
And UC Davis has like rights to the RECs as well.
Okay, different. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Yeah, next time. I don't want to keep you guys longer than needed. Remind me, and we'll discuss this. Yeah.
Question about the homework.
Okay.
Is it, usually the homework stuff is due